On the night of June 12, 1994, the quiet neighborhood of Brentwood, Los Angeles, became the center of one of the most infamous crime stories in American history. Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of football legend O.J. Simpson, and her friend Ron Goldman were found brutally murdered outside Nicole's home. The crime scene was horrifying. Nicole had been stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed with such force that it was nearly severed. Ron Goldman, who had apparently arrived at the scene moments before his death, had suffered multiple stab wounds, including a fatal one to the heart. Almost immediately, suspicions turned to O.J. Simpson, a man once revered as an American sports icon. Their volatile relationship, documented history of domestic violence, and ongoing personal disputes made him the prime suspect. As the investigation unfolded, forensic evidence, including blood samples and a glove found at the scene, further linked Simpson to the crime. Within days, the Los Angeles Police Department issued an arrest warrant for Simpson. What should have been a routine arrest soon turned into a media sensation. Instead of surrendering, Simpson disappeared, setting off one of the most surreal events in television history: the now infamous low-speed chase in a white Ford Bronco. With his friend Al Cowlings at the wheel and Simpson reportedly holding a gun to his head in the back seat, police cars trailed the Bronco through the Los Angeles freeways as millions of Americans watched live. It was no longer just a murder case. It had become a cultural event. The O.J. Simpson case was unlike any other. It was a trial that blended elements of celebrity, race, and justice, captivating audiences across the nation. Simpson was not just another defendant. He was an NFL Hall of Famer, an actor, and a public figure whose name was synonymous with success. The case struck a nerve with the American public, exposing deep racial divisions in the country. Many viewed the trial as more than just an individual's fight for justice. It became a symbol of the systemic flaws within the justice system, particularly regarding how race played a role in legal proceedings. Media coverage of the trial was relentless, turning the courtroom into a daily spectacle. For the first time in history, a criminal case was broadcast live in its entirety, with legal analysts and commentators dissecting every moment. Networks dedicated hours of programming to the trial, discussing everything from forensic evidence to the defense team's strategy. The trial introduced America to a new form of legal entertainment, where the courtroom became a stage and attorneys became performers in the eyes of the public. Beyond the legal proceedings, the case had a lasting impact on how crime and justice were discussed in the media. It reshaped the role of forensic evidence in high-profile trials, introduced the power of a televised defense, and brought racial tensions in America to the forefront. Even decades later, the O.J. Simpson trial remains one of the most talked-about cases in legal history, studied in law schools and analyzed in countless books, documentaries, and films. It was not just a murder trial. It was a defining moment in American culture, one that changed the landscape of both the justice system and the media forever. Born Orenthal James Simpson on July 9, 1947, in San Francisco, O.J. Simpson's early life was one of struggle and determination. Growing up in the Potrero Hill projects, he faced adversity from a young age, but his exceptional athleticism set him apart. In high school, he became a football sensation, earning a scholarship to the University of Southern California, USC, where he cemented his legacy as one of the greatest running backs in college football history. His dominance on the field peaked in 1968 when he won the Heisman Trophy, an award given to the nation's most outstanding college football player. His transition to the professional league was seamless. Drafted first overall by the Buffalo Bills in 1969, Simpson quickly became a household name in the NFL. His speed and agility made him one of the most electrifying players of his time. and in 1973 he became the first player to rush for over 2,000 yards in a single season, an achievement that solidified his place in football history. After a successful decade-long career, which also included a brief stint with the San Francisco 49ers, Simpson retired from the game, but his celebrity status only grew. Unlike many athletes who fade into obscurity after retirement, Simpson reinvented himself as a Hollywood star. He smoothly transitioned into acting, landing roles in major films such as The Towering Inferno and the Naked Gun series, where his comedic timing won over audiences. His charm and charisma made him a popular choice for television appearances and commercial endorsements, including a famous Hertz car rental ad campaign where he was seen sprinting through airports. He also became a sports broadcaster, further ingraining himself into American pop culture. For years, Simpson was seen as the epitome of success, an athlete who had beaten the odds, achieved greatness in multiple fields, and built a legacy beyond the football field. He was a symbol of the American dream, proof that talent and hard work could lead to fame, fortune, and adoration. He mingled with celebrities, attended exclusive events, and lived in luxury. Despite his divorce from his first wife, Marguerite, and his highly publicized but troubled marriage to Nicole Brown Simpson, his public persona remained largely untarnished. But on June 12, 1994, everything changed. The brutal murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman shattered the image of O.J. Simpson, turning him from a beloved sports icon into the most infamous suspect in the country. Within days, police zeroed in on him due to his history of domestic violence and mounting forensic evidence. His behavior during the initial stages of the investigation raised further suspicion, culminating in the now infamous white Ford Bronco chase, which was watched by nearly 95 million Americans. Suddenly, the man who had once been admired as an all-American hero was at the center of one of the most shocking murder cases in history. His fall from grace was swift and brutal. The same media that had once celebrated his achievements now dissected his personal life, uncovering a history of abuse, rage, and control over Nicole. The transition from superstar to accused killer was one of the most dramatic transformations in modern pop culture, and the trial that followed would only deepen the divide between those who still believed in his innocence and those convinced of his guilt. June 12, 1994, was supposed to be just another quiet evening in Brentwood, one of Los Angeles' most affluent neighborhoods. Nicole Brown Simpson had spent the night at an Italian restaurant, Mezzaluna, where her friend Ron Goldman worked as a waiter. She had gone there with family and friends, and later that night Goldman stopped by her home to return a pair of sunglasses that her mother had left at the restaurant. What happened next would shake the country. Just after midnight, Nicole and Goldman were brutally attacked outside her condo. Their bodies were discovered later that night by a neighbor's dog, who was found wandering with blood-stained paws. Police arrived at the scene shortly after and were met with a gruesome sight. Nicole's lifeless body lying at the base of the stairs, barefoot and covered in blood. Her throat had been slashed with such force that it was nearly severed. Both victims, but there was another DNA profile present, one that would soon lead detectives to a high-profile suspect. O.J. Simpson's name quickly surfaced in the investigation, and for good reason. His marriage to Nicole had been troubled for years, with documented police reports of domestic violence. Friends of Nicole recalled instances where she had feared for her safety, and in the months leading up to the murder, she had reportedly told those close to her that Simpson was stalking her. Police had responded to violent incidents at their home before, and Nicole had even called 911 in the past, terrified as Simpson shouted threats outside her door. Beyond their turbulent history, Simpson's behavior in the hours following the murder only raised further suspicions. He had a fresh cut on his hand, which he struggled to explain. His alibi was inconsistent, and forensic analysis began tying him directly to the crime. Blood droplets found at the scene contained his DNA and another glove, identical to the one found at Nicole's home, was discovered behind his guest house at Rockingham Estate. The mounting evidence was overwhelming, and just days after the murder, an arrest warrant was issued for O.J. Simpson. But instead of turning himself in, Simpson disappeared, setting off one of the most surreal events in modern American history. His white Ford Bronco was spotted on the freeway, triggering a slow-speed police chase that was broadcast live to millions. With a gun reportedly pointed at his own head, he sat in the back seat while his friend Al Cowlings drove. The entire country watched in disbelief as a former sports hero, now the most wanted man in America, fled from law enforcement. What should have been a routine arrest had transformed into a media circus, setting the stage for what would become the most famous trials of the century. Forensic evidence became the backbone of the case against O.J. Simpson. Investigators quickly uncovered a trail of blood, DNA, and key physical items that pointed directly to him. Blood samples found at the crime scene matched both victims, but more importantly, they also contained Simpson's DNA. Drops of blood extended from Nicole's condo to the back gate, suggesting that the killer had left the scene while still bleeding. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was a pair of gloves, one found at the crime scene, and the other at Simpson's Rockingham estate. These gloves were a rare brand, Eris Isotoner, and had blood from both victims as well as Simpson himself. Adding to the forensic puzzle were bloody footprints at the scene, later identified as belonging to a pair of Bruno Magli shoes, a high-end brand that Simpson initially denied ever wearing. However, later photographs surfaced showing him sporting the exact same model. Just as police were preparing to arrest Simpson, he vanished. This unexpected disappearance led to one of the most surreal moments in American television history, the slow-speed white Ford Bronco chase. Millions of viewers tuned in as Simpson, seated in the back seat with a gun to his head, was driven through the Los Angeles freeways by his friend and former teammate, Al Cowlings. The chase lasted over an hour, paralyzing the nation as news helicopters followed the vehicle, broadcasting the event in real time. When Simpson finally surrendered at his Brentwood home, police discovered critical evidence inside the Bronco. Blood samples consistent with both victims were found on the car's interior, further linking him to the crime. The Bronco, once a symbol of Simpson's celebrity lifestyle, had now become another key piece in the prosecution's case. As the investigation deepened, Simpson's own statements further raised suspicion. His timeline of events on the night of the murder was inconsistent, and his explanations seemed to shift. Even more telling was a fresh, deep cut on his left hand. Initially, he claimed he had cut himself on a piece of broken glass, but his story later changed, leading investigators to suspect it was sustained during the attack. With the forensic evidence, the bizarre Bronco chase, and Simpson's contradictory statements, the prosecution built a strong case against him. However, proving guilt in a courtroom would be another battle entirely, one that would soon unfold in front of the entire world. The prosecution's case against O.J. Simpson rested on what they believed was overwhelming forensic evidence. Led by Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, the prosecution aimed to prove that Simpson had both the motive and the opportunity to commit the murders. They focused heavily on DNA evidence, a relatively new tool in courtroom trials, which they argued placed Simpson at the crime scene. Blood samples found at Nicole Brown, Simpson's home, in his car, and at his estate were all consistent with his DNA. The challenge, however, was making sure the jury understood the science behind it, a task that proved to be more difficult than anticipated. Marcia Clark took the lead in presenting Simpson as a jealous ex-husband who couldn't handle Nicole moving on with her life. She emphasized the history of domestic abuse, introducing past 911 calls and police reports that documented physical violence. Clark argued that the murders were the culmination of years of control and possessiveness, fueled by rage. Christopher Darden, on the other hand, brought an emotional edge to the case, determined to see justice served. However, both prosecutors faced relentless media scrutiny, with Clark's appearance and demeanor constantly dissected, and Darden struggling against the racial undertones that would come to define the case. One of the prosecution's most significant pieces of evidence was the infamous bloody glove. One glove had been found at the crime scene, and its matching pair was discovered at Simpson's estate. The prosecution argued that this was undeniable proof that Simpson had been present at both locations during the night of the murders. Additionally, the DNA evidence was compelling. Simpson's blood was found at multiple points, and the likelihood of it belonging to anyone else was virtually impossible. The prosecution also sought to establish motive through Simpson's history of domestic violence. They called witnesses who testified to Nicole's fear of her ex-husband, as well as experts who explained the cycle of abuse and escalation. For Clark and Darden, the case was clear. Simpson had the motive, the means, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. However, despite their confidence, they were up against a formidable defense team. The burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt would soon be tested as the trial unfolded, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic legal battles in American history. From the moment O.J. Simpson's defense team, famously known as the Dream Team, took over the case, their strategy was clear: attack the credibility of the LAPD. And one of the defense's strongest arguments was that the LAPD had mishandled and possibly tampered with crucial evidence. They pointed to the chain of custody issues with blood samples, suggesting that improper handling could have led to cross-contamination. The defense also questioned the timeline of when key evidence was found enforcement to frame Simpson, reinforcing the defense's theory that Simpson was the target of a corrupt and expertly used this to his advantage, portraying Simpson as a black man persecuted by a deeply flawed system. Perhaps the most dramatic moment of the trial came when Simpson was asked to try on the bloody glove in front of the jury. As he struggled to fit his hand into the glove, the defense seized the opportunity to undermine the prosecution's case. Johnny Cochran turned this moment into a defining line of the trial, famously declaring, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." This statement resonated with the jury, creating a powerful visual argument that cast further doubt on the prosecution's claims. By the time the defense rested its case, they had successfully shifted the focus away from the murders and onto the LAPD. The narrative was no longer about the victims, but about police corruption, racial injustice, and a system that had historically oppressed Black Americans. Cochran's masterful rhetoric, combined with the public's existing skepticism toward law enforcement, proved to be one of the most effective legal strategies in modern history. The jury had been given enough doubt to question the prosecution's case, and the stage was now set for one of the most shocking verdicts in American legal history. From the moment O.J. Simpson became the prime suspect in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, the case transformed into a media spectacle unlike anything the world had seen before. What should have been a straightforward criminal trial quickly became a national obsession, dominating news cycles, talk shows, and public discourse. The blend of celebrity, race, and violent crime made it irresistible to both the media and the public, turning every development into headline news. News channels provided around-the-clock coverage, dissecting every detail of the case. Networks like CNN, which had previously been known for political and international news, found a massive audience in true crime reporting. Legal analysts became television personalities overnight, breaking down testimonies, forensic evidence, and courtroom strategy for viewers who followed the case as if it were a scripted drama. The trial blurred the lines between crime and entertainment, creating a new genre of courtroom-based reality television. What set the O.J. Simpson trial apart from previous high-profile cases was its unprecedented access to the courtroom. With cameras allowed inside, millions of Americans watched every minute of the proceedings as if they were tuning into a long-running television series. Every witness testimony, attorney objection, and judge's ruling played out in real time for the world to see. For the legal teams, this created an added challenge. Every move was scrutinized, every facial expression analyzed, and every mistake amplified by the media. Attorneys, normally focused solely on the law, had to navigate the public relations aspect of the trial, knowing that their performance could shape public opinion as much as the evidence itself. The live broadcast also put immense pressure on Judge Lance Ito, who faced criticism for allowing the trial to become a media circus. Some legal experts argued that the constant presence of cameras influenced courtroom behavior, with attorneys playing to the public rather than focusing purely on the legal arguments. Witnesses, too, became public figures overnight, facing both praise and harassment based on their testimonies. As the trial progressed, it became clear that public opinion was deeply divided, and race played a significant role in how the case was perceived. Many African Americans saw Simpson's defense as a rare victory against a historically biased legal system. Given the LAPD's long history of racial profiling and brutality, highlighted by the Rodney King beating just a few years prior, many viewed the trial as an indictment of police misconduct rather than a simple murder case. Conversely, many white Americans, particularly those who believed in the strength of the forensic evidence, saw the case as a glaring miscarriage of justice. Simpson's celebrity status also complicated the narrative. To some, he was a privileged athlete who had used his fame and wealth to escape justice. To others, he was a beloved cultural figure being targeted unfairly. The debate over his guilt or innocence extended far beyond the courtroom, igniting heated discussions about race, class, and justice in America. Even after the verdict was announced, the trial's impact continued to shape public discourse. It forever changed how the media covered criminal cases, turning high-profile trials into national events. The saturation of courtroom television, true crime documentaries, and legal analysis shows can all trace their origins back to the O.J. Simpson trial. More than just a legal battle, it was a turning point in American history, one that reflected the deep social divisions that still lingered beneath the surface. After more than 8 months of testimony, cross-examinations, and legal maneuvering, the jury in the O.J. Simpson trial was sent to deliberate. Despite the mountain of forensic evidence presented by the prosecution, the jury reached a decision shockingly fast. Less than 4 hours of deliberation before returning with their verdict. On October 3, 1995, the world came to a standstill as millions tuned in to watch the verdict being read live on television. When the court clerk announced, "Not guilty," gasps filled the courtroom. O.J. Simpson sat motionless for a moment, then exhaled deeply, his eyes brimming with emotion. His defense team erupted in quiet celebration, while the prosecution, visibly stunned, processed the reality that their case had failed to convince the jury. Across the country, reactions were polarized. Some cheered, others were outraged, but no one was indifferent. The divide in public reaction was largely racial. Many Black Americans saw Simpson's acquittal as a long overdue moment of justice, a rare instance where a Black man had beaten a system that had historically been stacked against them. Given the backdrop of the Rodney King beating and the 1992 Los Angeles riots, distrust in law enforcement was at an all-time high, and many believed that Simpson had been targeted by a corrupt and racist LAPD. The verdict, to them, was a symbolic victory. On the other side, many white Americans, particularly those who believed in the power of forensic evidence, saw the acquittal as a blatant miscarriage of justice. The prosecution had presented blood samples, DNA evidence, and a clear motive. Yet it had all been overshadowed by the defense's ability to shift the focus to police misconduct. To them, though Simpson walked free in the criminal case, the legal battle was far from over. In 1997, the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman filed a wrongful death lawsuit against him in civil court. This time, without the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, the case played out differently. The jury found Simpson liable for the deaths of both victims and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages to the families. While the civil verdict provided some form of justice for the victims' families, it was a hollow victory. Simpson, once a multimillionaire, claimed he was financially ruined and unable to pay the full settlement. Over the years, the families attempted to collect the damages through Simpson's assets, including memorabilia, book rights, and other earnings. However, the ruling did little to change public perception. Those who believed he was guilty felt justice had come too late, while those who saw him as a victim of racial bias still stood by his innocence. The O.J. Simpson case had set a precedent for how high-profile trials could divide a nation. It was no longer just about two victims and a suspect. It was about race, celebrity, and the very foundation of the American legal system. The verdict marked the end of one of the most controversial trials in history. But the debate over whether justice had truly been served would continue for decades. Even after being acquitted in the criminal trial, O.J. Simpson's life would never be the same. The not guilty verdict may have saved him from prison, but it did not protect him from the court of public opinion. His reputation was permanently tarnished, and while some still saw him as a victim of racial injustice, many others viewed him as a guilty man who had escaped conviction. Despite his efforts to return to normal life, Simpson quickly realized that Hollywood and the sports world were no longer welcoming him back. Endorsements had vanished, acting roles dried up, and he was no longer seen as a beloved public figure. The civil trial verdict only worsened his situation. Being found liable for the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman not only confirmed public suspicions about his guilt, but also left him financially drained. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million in damages, a sum that he never fully repaid. Over the years, the families of the victims pursued his assets, but Simpson found ways to shield his earnings, claiming he was nearly bankrupt. More than a decade later, Simpson found himself back in the headlines, this time for an entirely different crime. In 2007, he led a group of men into a Las Vegas hotel room to reclaim sports memorabilia that he insisted had been stolen from him. The confrontation turned aggressive, with Simpson and his associates wielding firearms and demanding the return of his property. The incident quickly escalated, and Simpson was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, including armed robbery and kidnapping. In stark contrast to his 1995 trial, there was no dream team to defend him this time. In 2008, he was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 33 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 9 years. Many saw this as a delayed form of justice, a reckoning for the murders that he had allegedly committed but never served time for. The irony of the situation was not lost on the public. After evading prison for the most infamous trial of the century, Simpson had now been sentenced for a crime that seemed trivial by comparison. During his time in prison, Simpson largely stayed out of the public eye, though he occasionally made headlines for disciplinary issues. In 2017, after serving 9 years, he was granted parole. His release reignited public debate about his legacy. Some believed he had served his time and should be left alone, while others still viewed him as a criminal who had gotten away with murder. In the years since his release, Simpson has maintained a relatively low profile, though he occasionally makes media appearances and comments on social issues. He remains a controversial figure, with many seeing him as a symbol of everything that is flawed within the justice system. His name, once synonymous with athletic greatness, is now forever linked to one of the most infamous legal sagas in American history. For some, he is a man who beat the system twice. For others, he is a man who will never escape the shadow of his past. The O.J. Simpson trial is often remembered not just for its sensational verdict, accusing that the police had mishandled the samples. In the years that followed, DNA technology would become more trusted and widespread in criminal cases, forever changing the way investigations were conducted. The trial also set a precedent for the way high-profile defense teams approached their strategies. The Dream Team, led by Johnny Cochran, showed the world how a well-funded, high-profile defense could manipulate public perception and sway a jury. Their focus on police misconduct, racial bias, and the handling of evidence became a blueprint for future defense teams in major criminal cases. This trial also highlighted the importance of jury selection, as the defense team carefully curated a jury they believed would be sympathetic to their arguments. The trial sparked a broader conversation about racial bias in the justice system, especially in light of the Rodney King incident and the racial divisions it revealed. The Simpson case also redefined media coverage of criminal trials. For the first time in history, the public was able to watch a trial unfold in real time, thanks to live courtroom broadcasts. This level of access to the judicial process created an entirely new form of media consumption, with 24-hour news cycles focused on every new development in the case. Legal analysts and commentators became celebrities themselves, breaking down every twist and turn for an audience eager to engage with the drama. The rise of true crime as a genre owes much of its popularity to the coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial, which helped pave the way for a generation of crime documentaries, podcasts, and TV shows. This constant media coverage, however, also sparked debates over the ethical implications of sensationalizing the justice system. Some critics argued that the media's obsession with the trial turned it into a form of entertainment, prioritizing ratings over the serious implications of the case. The blurred lines between news and entertainment became a hallmark of future high-profile trials, as the public demanded more and more access to the proceedings. The legacy of the O.J. Simpson trial lives on in the numerous books, documentaries, and films it has inspired. The 2016 FX series, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, and the Oscar-winning documentary, O.J. Made in America, both reignited public fascination with the case, offering fresh insights into the trial and its broader implications for race, justice, and fame. These projects have kept the story of O.J. Simpson alive in the cultural consciousness, ensuring that new generations continue to learn about the trial's significance. The case continues to be a subject of study in law schools, media studies programs, and criminology courses, as it is seen as a pivotal moment in American legal history. The trial is often cited as a case study on how the media can influence the judicial process, and how race, celebrity, and the justice system are intertwined. The O.J. Simpson trial may have ended over 2 decades ago, but its impact on the justice system, media, and society at large is still felt today.